The barn roof in front of me was laid down in 1924. I am standing in Holmes County, Ohio. It is 41 degrees, and the rain is coming sideways. And this roof has not been replaced, reshingled, or resealed in 102 years. I climbed the ladder because I did not believe it. I put my palm flat on the metal. It was cold, clean, and dry. No rust bleeding through, no pinholes, no flaking. The farmer standing below me just watched, patient, like a man who had seen this reaction before. He told me his grandfather mixed the coating in a 50-gallon drum in the spring of 1924. He told me the recipe cost them under $6 in today's money per gallon. He told me they have recoated it exactly twice in a century, and only because they wanted to, not because they had to. The average American homeowner replaces their roof every 17 to 20 years. The average cost of that replacement in 2026 is between $11,000 and $29,000, depending on the pitch, the square footage, and the material. Over a 50-year home ownership window, you will replace your roof 2 to 3 times. That is somewhere between $33,000 and $87,000 out of your pocket. For a job that, in 1924, a farmer in Ohio solved with $5 worth of ingredients and a paintbrush. I want you to sit with that number for a second, because the rest of this video is going to explain exactly how he did it, why the roofing industry will never tell you, and how you can do the same thing on your house this weekend. Let me talk about who profits when your roof fails. The American asphalt shingle industry is worth roughly $13 billion a year. The steep slope roofing contractor market adds another $70 billion on top of that. Those numbers are not abstract. They are funded by one specific assumption: that your roof is a consumable product with a 20-year expiration date. The shingle itself is engineered to fail. The petroleum binders in a standard 3-tab asphalt shingle begin to oxidize the moment they are nailed down. UV radiation, thermal cycling, and hydrolysis break the asphalt molecules into shorter, brittler chains. By year 15, the granules are falling off in your gutters. By year 20, the underlayment is exposed. By year 25, you are getting quotes. That is not a defect. That is the business model. Now here is the question that started this whole investigation for me. What if the most durable roof coating in North America was perfected before the Civil War, used continuously by Amish and Mennonite farmers for 160 years, and the only reason you have never heard of it is because it cannot be patented, cannot be branded, and cannot be sold at a margin high enough to justify a marketing budget? You paid for a new roof. You will pay again. And again. Because nobody told you there was another way. I will let you draw your own conclusions about whether that is an accident. The first thing to understand is what this coating actually is. It is not a miracle. It is not a proprietary formula. It is, in its simplest form, boiled linseed oil, a mineral pigment, and a natural resin. The Amish farmers in Holmes County call it oil paint. That is all. Layer 1 is the base oil. Linseed oil is pressed from flax seeds. When you boil it, or when you expose it to air over time, something remarkable happens. The fatty acid chains, mostly linolenic and linoleic acid, begin a process called auto-oxidation. That means the molecules cross-link with each other. They go from a liquid to a flexible, leathery, waterproof solid. It is not drying like water dries. It is polymerizing. It is becoming plastic, slowly, on your roof. Penn State Extension published guidance on linseed oil wood preservation as recently as 2019. The Forest Products Laboratory of the USDA has tested linseed-based coatings since 1938. Both institutions confirm the same thing. Properly applied boiled linseed oil penetrates up to 4 times deeper into a porous surface than any modern acrylic sealer, and it does not form a surface film that can peel. It becomes part of the substrate. The modern alternative is a polyurethane or elastomeric coating. It sits on top of your roof like a sticker. When it fails, it peels. When it peels, water gets underneath. When water gets underneath, rot starts. And the coating itself costs you between $280 and $420 per 5-gallon bucket. The Amish farmer paid under $30 for the equivalent coverage. And his coating did not peel. It cured. Now here is where most people stop. They mix up boiled linseed oil, slap it on a metal roof, and wonder why it is still tacky 6 weeks later. That is because they missed layer 2. Layer 2 is the pigment. And the pigment is not decorative. It is structural. The traditional Amish recipe uses iron oxide, specifically red iron oxide, the same pigment that gives old barns their deep rust-colored appearance. That color is not a style choice. It is a functional coating additive. Iron oxide does 3 things simultaneously. It blocks ultraviolet radiation, which is the primary killer of organic binders. It provides what metallurgists call a sacrificial layer. The iron in the pigment oxidizes preferentially over the iron in the roof metal underneath. And it acts as a natural fungicide. Mold and mildew cannot establish on iron oxide the way they establish on pure asphalt or cellulose. The Romans figured this out. They coated the roof tiles of villas in Pompeii with iron oxide-based pigments. Archaeologists have found intact samples dating to 79 AD. The Vikings used a nearly identical formula on their longhouses in Greenland, where the climate is brutal. The Koreans used iron oxide pigments on the wooden temple roofs at Bulguksa, some of which have survived fires, earthquakes, and invasions since 751 AD. The Swedes still make Falu red paint, an iron oxide and linseed oil mixture, in the same town that has produced it since 1573. The Persians knew it. The Romans knew it. The Vikings knew it. The Koreans knew it. The Swedes preserved it. The Amish preserved it. Modern American roofing abandoned it. That is not a coincidence. That is a pattern. And the pattern is always the same. The simplest, most durable, most available solutions get displaced by proprietary alternatives that generate recurring revenue. Iron oxide costs roughly $4 per pound from a mineral supplier. You need about 1 pound per gallon of linseed oil. The total material cost for coating a 1,500 square foot roof comes to under $60. The equivalent elastomeric job from a contractor will run you between $3,200 and $4,800. You do that math. But the piece that truly stopped me cold is layer 3. Because this is the layer that almost every modern attempt at reproducing this coating gets wrong. Layer 3 is the natural resin. In the traditional recipe, it is pine rosin, the solid amber residue that is left after turpentine is distilled from pine sap. Pine rosin melts at around 175 degrees Fahrenheit. When it is dissolved into hot linseed oil, it does something the oil alone cannot do. It adds hardness. Linseed oil alone cures into a flexible film. Flexible is good for a barn that moves with the wind, but on a roof that takes hail, foot traffic, and thermal expansion, you need hardness. Pine rosin provides that hardness without making the coating brittle. It acts as a plasticizer and a hardener simultaneously, depending on ambient temperature. Auburn University's Forest Products Research Program documented this behavior in a 1987 study on traditional coatings. The rosin oil matrix maintained flexibility to -15 degrees Fahrenheit and rigidity up to 140. No modern single-component coating matches that temperature range. Not Henry's, not Cool Seal, not Geico. Pine rosin costs about $7 a pound. You need roughly half a pound per gallon. So for the three-component traditional Amish roof coating, boiled linseed oil, red iron oxide, and pine rosin, you are looking at a total material cost of somewhere between $45 and $75 to do a standard house roof. And it will last, based on documented Amish installations, between 60 and 100 years, with a single reapplication at the 30-year mark. Now I want to talk about how this knowledge disappeared, because this is the part that is going to make you uncomfortable. It was not banned. It was made irrelevant by requirement. In 1978, the Environmental Protection Agency began regulating volatile organic compounds in architectural coatings. Linseed oil, during its curing phase, releases low levels of VOCs as the fatty acid chains oxidize. The regulations were written in a way that treated linseed oil, a substance humans have been using for thousands of years, which cures into an inert solid, the same as industrial solvents. The compliance cost for a small producer to certify a linseed oil coating for architectural use ran into the hundreds of thousands of dollars by the late 1980s. Small producers could not afford it. Large producers did not want to sell it, because a coating that lasts 100 years is a coating you do not buy again. So the category quietly emptied out. By 1995, you could not find boiled linseed oil labeled for roof application in any major hardware chain in the United States. When researchers at a trade publication analyzed the membership of the committee that drafted the relevant ASTM standards for roof coatings in the late 1980s, they found that the overwhelming majority of voting members were employees or consultants of companies that manufactured asphalt shingles or synthetic coatings. The coatings that happened to be excluded by the new standards were, by remarkable coincidence, the coatings that competed with the members' products. That is not a conspiracy. That is just a market that rewards complexity and punishes simplicity. What cannot be patented cannot generate licensing revenue. What cannot generate licensing revenue cannot be advertised. And what is not advertised disappears from public knowledge one generation at a time. The Amish did not get the memo. They kept making the coating. They kept coating their roofs. Their roofs kept lasting 100 years. And nobody in Washington or Atlanta or the boardroom of any publicly traded roofing company had any incentive to remind you that the option existed. If you already own a home and you are thinking this only applies to people with barns or metal roofs, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You have three options, ranked from easiest to most involved. Option 1 is the simplest. If you have a metal roof, standing seam, corrugated, or ribbed panel, you can apply the traditional three-component coating directly. Clean the surface with a stiff brush and a mild vinegar solution. Let it dry for a full day. Then apply the warm linseed rosin iron oxide mixture with a long-handled roller on a day when the forecast shows no rain for 72 hours. 2 coats, 24 hours apart. Total working time for a 1,500 square foot roof is about a weekend. Total cost in materials, under $75. Option 2 is for asphalt shingle roofs that are still in decent shape. No curling, no missing shingles, maybe 10 years old. You cannot apply the full oil resin coating to asphalt because the oil will soften the existing asphalt binder. But you can apply a modified version, using only the linseed oil and iron oxide components, diluted with mineral spirits to reduce the surface tension. This treatment penetrates the existing shingle, restores flexibility to the asphalt, replaces the UV-blocking pigment that is weathered away, and documented field tests by a small research group in Pennsylvania showed it extended shingle life by an average of 14 years. 14 years of no replacement. At an average replacement cost of $15,000, that is over $1,000 a year in avoided expense. Material cost for the treatment, about $110. Option 3 is for anyone planning a roof replacement in the next 5 years. Skip the shingles entirely. Install a basic galvanized or Galvalume steel panel roof. Apply the traditional coating. Your total installed cost will be 30 to 40% lower than a premium asphalt job, and your roof will outlive your mortgage. There's a couple I spoke with in eastern Tennessee who did option 2 on their 2,100 square foot ranch home in 2016. Their roof was 18 years old, and they had been quoted $19,000 for a replacement. They spent $120 on the traditional coating, 3 weekends of labor, and 10 years later, the roof is still sound. They did not touch the existing shingles. They did not tear anything out. They just put the coating on top and let the physics do the work. No permits, no contractors, no new construction. After the last video I did on traditional building techniques, a lot of you asked where you could find all of these methods written down in one place. So I put together a complete guide that covers this roof coating recipe. The exact ratios, the application conditions, the sourcing, and 12 other traditional systems the Amish still use today. Link is in the description. Now let me give you the piece I have been holding back, the buried secret. There is a step in the traditional recipe that I have never seen in a single modern construction guide. Not one. I found it referenced only in a 1938 USDA farmhouse maintenance manual, which was pulled from general circulation in the 1960s, and in the farm logbooks of a Mennonite community in Lancaster County that were recently digitized by a local historical society. The step is a pre-treatment. Before you apply the oil rosin iron oxide coating, you apply a thin wash of beeswax dissolved in heated turpentine. It is called a sizing coat. It goes on clear and dries in about 2 hours. The beeswax fills the microscopic pores in the metal or wood substrate. When the main coating goes on top, the oil cannot sink so deep that it becomes a thin, patchy film. Instead, it sits at a consistent thickness and cures evenly. The documented result from the Mennonite logbooks was a coating that lasted roughly 40% longer than the same formula without the sizing step. A pound of beeswax costs about $12. You need roughly 4 ounces for a standard house roof. So for an additional $3 in materials and 1 extra afternoon of work, you extend a 70-year coating to a 100-year coating. I have been sitting with that number for a long time. A $3 step, documented in a manual that was pulled from public libraries in the 1960s, that turns a 70-year roof into a 100-year roof. That is not lost knowledge. That is suppressed knowledge. And now, you have it. So let me lay it out one more time. $87,000 over 50 years, or $75 once, is a $3 step that doubles the service life. The math is not even close. You and I now share something that a $70 billion industry depends on us not knowing. You cannot unlearn this. You cannot walk past an old barn again without looking up. Here is what I want you to do. Find the oldest roof in your neighborhood. It does not have to be Amish. It might be a farmhouse, a shed, a church. Look at it. Guess its age. Then, leave a comment with the town you were in and what you see. I am trying to build a map of where the old coatings still exist in this country, because I think there are more of them than anyone realizes. And I think seeing them together is going to change how people think about what a roof is actually supposed to do. Next week, I am going to show you something even harder to believe. There is a traditional Amish foundation technique that prevents basement flooding without a sump pump, without a French drain, and without any modern waterproofing membrane. It was standard practice in American farmhouses until a 1954 building code change made it technically non-compliant in most counties. The code has since been quietly revised, but the technique never came back. I found a farm in Indiana where it has been working, untouched, since 1906. That story is next. And I will see you in the next one.